Since its addition in 2011, Minecraft's enchanting system has remained pretty lackluster, and aside from a few updates, the enchantment system hasn't received any attention whatsoever. However, with such an outdated system, it raises the question, can Minecraft's enchanting system be fixed? However, before we can answer this, I'd like to point out that unlike my other videos, these solutions are coming from an amazing mod, that being Enchantment by the very talented MORIYA'S. His links will be in the pinned comment as well as the description. Now, with that out of the way, let's start by addressing the issues with the current enchanting system. First of all, the enchanting table is way too expensive, and what I mean by this is the level cost for maxed enchantments being 30 is a huge roadblock for a lot of players' progression, and in a way encourages mob grinders, which are really unfun to have to wait around. Alternatively, the other option provided for enchanting is through villager trading, which is somehow even worse than the prior, encouraging players to grind for emeralds, which is again just not very fun. And worst of all in my opinion is that almost 2/3 of the vanilla enchantments are stat increases. Although to Mojang's credit, they have been improving on that recently. But for all of these issues, how does enchantment go about resolving them? Well, first of all, enchantment completely overhauls the enchanting system, removing the randomness from enchanting and allowing the player to choose exactly which enchantment they'd like to use. Along with that, the mod also changes the enchanting cost requirement, with it being replaced by material cost that correlates to the item the player's enchanting. This material cost is also made more affordable through books, with the minimum item cost being 2 of the corresponding item. Additionally, the mod completely removes durability, with tools and armor being unable to break, but with that comes the downside of only 1 enchantment per item. Although this may seem harsh, it really isn't, as on a normal piece of armor, most people will get protection, mending, and unbreaking. And without durability, there's no need for either mending or unbreaking. As for with tools, all enchanted tools, at least in more recent versions of the mod, get built-in efficiency as a bonus when they're enchanted, as well as tridents getting loyalty and a bunch of other things. Now, on the topic of enchantments, I should mention that enchantment completely overhauls the list of enchantments available to use, with it removing a majority of vanilla enchantments and keeping only 6, with those being Windburst, Fire Aspect, Silk Touch, Luck of the Sea, Channeling, and Riptide. No more protection, no more sharpness, and no more Bane of Arthropods. And with almost all of the vanilla enchantments gone, what does the mod do to replace them? Well, each enchantable item has between 3 and 4 enchantment options, with there being 40 different enchantments available in total. So let's go over them, starting with the armor enchantments. For helmets, the 3 available enchantments are Assimilation, Perception, and Veil. Assimilation allows the player to put food items into their offhand and automatically consume them when they're hungry. It also allows for players to consume food at a faster rate, which is especially useful for players who are either bad with health management or need to heal quickly. Perception allows the player to see in the dark, with it serving as permanent Fulbright and allowing the player to highlight mobs behind walls. Veil, on the other hand, disguises the player's name tag when behind walls, and greatly reduces the detection range of hostile mobs. As for chestplates, there are 4 different enchantments, with those being Adrenaline, Amphibious, Strafe, and Warden Spine. Adrenaline increases the player's movement speed, as well as their defense proportional to the amount of health they're missing, with a player on low health being significantly faster than one on full, with it capping out at 40% extra speed and 20% extra defense. Amphibious lets the player breathe, mine, and move in water with more efficiency. Additionally, with Amphibious, the player will be able to riptide out of water and extinguish themselves for a short period of time as indicated by the dripping particles. Strafe lets the player perform a short mid-air strafe by crouching and allowing them to get extra mobility and break any potential falls. Lastly, for chestplates, the Warden Spine enchantment blinds and harms those who attack the user from behind. Personally, this is my least favorite enchantment in the entire mod, as it promotes running away from fights in a PvP setting in a very obnoxious way. Moving on to leggings, the 3 enchantments for those are Dash, Gale, and Slide. Dash is essentially strafe for leggings, with it letting the player launch themselves in any direction. Gale allows for players to double or triple jump if their leggings are either diamond or netherite, as well as letting players slow their descent as a means to cancel fall damage. Leggings also have the Slide enchantment, which lets players move faster in a set direction, slam into the ground to deal knockback, and absorb fall damage. And for the last set of armor enchantments, Boots. The enchantments for Boots are Bouncy, Buoy, and Sticky. Bouncy makes the player immune to fall damage, with them bouncing a proportional height based on how much fall damage they would have taken. It also grants the ability to charge up a super jump, which allows players to get an amazing amount of verticality. Buoy allows the player to walk on water, submerging themselves and being able to jump out. And finally, Sticky. With Sticky, the player will leave a trail of honey, slowing down anything that walks on it. With Sticky, however, players are also given the ability to slide down walls, like with honey blocks, but also they're given the ability to wall jump. All 3 boost enchantments are also available for horse armor, which really helps to make horses a lot more fun to play around with. If you couldn't already tell, these enchantments are very movement based, with none of them just being stat increases, as enchantment aims to make Minecraft feel sort of like a movement shooter, kind of like Ultra Kill if you've ever played that. And like any movement shooter, enchantments adds plenty of new weapons in the form of weapon and tool enchantments, so let's take a look at those, starting with the sword. The enchantments for the sword consist of Berserk, Fire Aspect, and Frostbite. Berserk is kind of like Adrenaline in the sense that it deals more damage depending on how much health the user has, and capping out at just over 10 damage per hit. Fire Aspect is basically the same as it is in vanilla, except it can be used as a flint and steel, and light things on fire. As for the other sword enchantment, Frostbite lets the user freeze anything it hits, with it doing the same effect as Powdered Snow. And when the user kills a mob, it's frozen, with it being able to be punched to blocks and players and shattering on impact. Now onto the next tool. The axe has 4 possible enchantments, with those being Beheading, Lumberjack, Molten, and Silk Touch. Beheading, while not doing any additional damage, is especially good for getting mob and player heads, as when a player kills a mob with it, the head has a chance to drop, including Wither Skulls. Beheading also works on players with a 100% drop rate, and is generally just good for aura farming. Lumberjacking, on the other hand, allows the player to break any connected logs almost instantly. Moving on, the other 2 enchantments, Molten and Silk Touch, are not exclusive to the axe, and can be put on any tool. Molten is basically an auto-smelting enchantment, and allows players to smelt any blocks they break with their tool. As for Silk Touch, it is exactly the same as it is in vanilla. Pickaxes have 1 new enchantment aside from Molten and Silk Touch, with that being Extracting. Extracting allows the player to extract resources from connected ore blocks, with it essentially being a vein mining enchantment. Now, the Shovel, on the other hand, has 4 enchantments, with 2 of them being Molten and Silk Touch, and the other 2 being Bury and Scooping. Bury lets the user submerge other mobs and players into the ground below them if it's soft enough, which is amazing if you're in a pinch and need to run away. Scooping, on the other hand, is essentially this mod's version of looting, increasing the amount of damage per hit, as well as raising the amount of mob drops the player gets. Similarly to the pickaxe, the hoe only has 1 unique enchantment, besides Molten and Silk Touch, with that being Apex. Apex serves as sharpness for hoes, with hits from further away doing even more damage. Now, with the main tools out of the way, the rest of the weapons is where I think this mod shines the most. So let's start with bows, with their enchantments being Delay, Chaos, and Phasing. Chaos makes any arrow shot from a bow have a random negative effect, with the player being able to sneak to make them beneficial. Delay, on the other hand, is basically just the YouTube Shorts livestream enchantment, and what I mean by that is that it freezes the player's arrows mid-air, though the user can punch to shoot them all forwards at once. And Phasing allows arrows to pass through thin layers of blocks, which could help the player hit through walls with the help of something like Perception. The crossbow enchantments are some of my favorites in the entire mod, with the 3 being Brimstone, Scatter, and Torch. Brimstone essentially transforms your health bar into the ammo, allowing the player to load between 1 to 6 hearts into the crossbow, and dealing a devastating amount of damage in the form of a piercing laser that ignores armor. Scatter, on the other hand, lets the user load Amethyst into the crossbow, with it firing in a burst, essentially turning it into a shotgun. Torch, as the name implies, allows players to load torches into the crossbow, and unload them just as fast. Now, let's take a step back and look at a slightly more unorthodox tool, with that being the Fishing Rod. The Fishing Rod has 3 enchantments, with those being Disarm, Grapple, and Luck of the Sea. Luck of the Sea is exactly as it is in vanilla, so there's no need to cover it. But Disarm and Grapple are both very unique. Disarm allows the player to steal any item out of the hands of mobs, which is great for getting tridents. Additionally, it works to a lesser degree on players, with it being able to disable whatever item they're holding when they're disarmed. As for Grapple, well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Now back to the last couple of weapons, the trident has 4 different options, with those being Channeling, Leech, Riptide, and Warp. Channeling has been slightly modified, with it being able to hit mobs in a chain, strike lightning regardless of weather, and having built-in fire aspect. Riptide, on the other hand, is exactly the same as it is in vanilla. As for the modded enchants, Leech attaches onto the target, dealing 2.5 extra hearts and siphoning it into the user's health bar. As for Warp, it essentially serves as an infinite ender pearl and allows the player to explore quickly or escape from difficult situations. And for our last weapon, the Mace. The Mace has 3 enchantments, with those being Meteor, Thunderstruck, and Windburst. Windburst is almost exactly the same, with the only change being that it's able to shoot a wind charge with a cooldown. Meteor, on the other hand, allows the player to launch into the air, igniting anything around it on fire. It also has built-in fire aspect, which is another really nice bonus. And finally, Thunderstruck allows the player to lift themselves off the ground and launch themselves as a projectile, dealing area damage and having the same chain ability as Channeling. And that's all of the enchantments. If this mod looks familiar at all, that's probably because it's used in the Content SMP, a modded server that I'm a huge fan of, and a great example of the use cases of enchantments in an SMP setting. And so, to answer the question I asked at the start of the video, absolutely. While enchantments might not be the best solution for the vanilla game, I think a lot of the aspects of the mod would heavily benefit the game. Obviously, I'm a huge advocate for more non-statistic based enchantments, and I think enchantments does a really great job at that. And additionally, I think that the mod's removal of random chance involved in enchanting is much more fun to play with, rather than forcing players to gamble levels in order to get a good enchantment, or alternatively, sit in a trading hall for hours. And that's everything. Enchantments is one of my favorite mods of all time, and I really wanted to show it off. So obviously go support Moriya, his links are in the description as well as the pinned comment. And if you have any ideas of your own, let me know in the comments. I'd love to see them. Anyways, bye bye, subscribe, bye bye.